daily practice methods. Not just at practice, but outside of here. I was thinking about this the other day, and people were talking about who's really good at this game and stuff like that, and yet here we are, Dukes, and we're still trying to figure out, you know, I have a great deal of respect for people who have proved themselves like this, and then he comes to me and says, well, what do you think about changing my stance? I have a lot of respect for that, but the reason he's as good is because he does that. We have others who do that. That learning doesn't stop. The reality is, as good as we are, and I've been fighting about 20 years. For most of that, I've gone to 2 practices a week and 2 events a month. So I fought for 20 years, 10 times a week, or a month, 10 times a month. That's a lot for us. But really, let's compare that to whatever you do for a living. How many hours have I done this compared to how many hours you've done with your job? And let's talk about who's really better at what they're doing. I don't care what you do, you're better at it. You did it 30, 40 hours a week, for God's sake. You know, and if you really applied yourself, you're pretty great at whatever your job is. Certainly better at that job than I am at fighting, because I don't do this much. Somebody asked me once, well, what do you do to practice in between practices? And my response at the time was, I don't do anything. I don't lift weights. I don't work on a Pell. I don't do all the things I should. I don't run on a treadmill. I don't do any of those things I probably should do. And then I started thinking about it. You know what? I do stuff almost all the time. And then I became more aware of it, and I began to apply some of that. So I want to share with you some of the things that I do when I'm not at practice. So before that, I want to cover quick things about at practice. The first is, and this is a big deal with me, because I don't actually use it for this reason, but working with a Pell. It's not that I don't think you should use a Pell. Pell is a very valuable tool, but it can also be a great hindrance if you don't use it consciously. The problem with a Pell is this. If he's a Pell, okay, I get used to, this is about right for range for me. Dang, so I work on my shots. Okay? I come back another day, I probably got holes in the ground now where my feet are going, and I work my shots. What this means is, I get really good at throwing my shots. I get good at throwing my shots from here against a fixed opponent. Okay? Now, instead of a Pell, he's a fighter in a list. They call lay on, and I do my Pell thing. All right, well, he's not standing still for starters, and he's already moving. What am I supposed to do with that? That doesn't mean that this Pell work is bad. Just when you use the Pell, be very conscious of what you're using it for. If you're using it to practice shots, then do that. If you're still working on stance, then use it for that. If he's a Pell again, so he's back to being a pole, I am not gonna do this. Because I'm not gonna do that in a fight. I'm gonna stand out here where the Pell can't hit me, work on my stance, and then I'm gonna move in on my chop. Because whatever you practice, that's what you're gonna do. If you practice standing up here and taking your stance, that's what you're going to do. And I would bet money that guy's going to kill you before you take your stance. And that sucks. Does that make sense? So you can use the Pell for all kinds of things, including the movement. How do I close on an opponent, roll out, and fire the shot? That's great. Do that. Just make sure you know why you're using it. The same thing applies when you do your fights at practice. Practice is practice. If you are fighting someone to try to pull all your things together, that's cool, do that. If you're working on a particular shot or something, then do that. If you need to tell your opponent, look, I'm doing a thing, and I need you to not throw back at me for a little bit, will you do that? Do that. It's practice. If you just go out there and beat on each other all the time, guess what you get good at? You know, you'll never get better than that. If that's what you want, do it. Because if that's fun, by God, have a good time. But don't expect to get better. The last is what I do on a daily basis to practice. There are several things that I found that I do, because I started thinking about it, so now I do it consciously. One is while driving. Okay? 10 and 2 on a steering wheel, right? Does that look familiar? 10 and 2 is sword and shield position. Then into a floor and T position. Okay? The only problem, which is actually not a problem, is you have a steering wheel in your way. So you're driving, you can let go with your sword hand, and now you can practice your shot. You're serving your soup, and you're dumping the soup. But you'll notice you can't swing, you have to throw. Because if you swing, the steering wheel's in the way. So I will really slowly make sure my mechanics are all correct. Sure, I can't use my hip, but now I'm driving. I can get my arm mechanics down. You want to work on your offhand? Great, swap them out. Get the feel for following that path. Here's the trick with your muscles. Your muscles have memory, but the memory is path, it is not time. If you work really fast, lots of shots on that pedal, making quick shots over the steering wheel, you will very quickly teach your muscles that path. But you don't know what that path is. They do, but you don't. If you go really slow and make sure it's always right, and you accelerate it later, it will follow the same path. It's the way your muscles work. Okay?
You'll learn it faster.
You'll learn it slower, but you will learn it correctly.
No. For me, if I do it slow, the muscles learn the path quicker.
More repetition will learn faster, but the slower will be more correct. But you're correct, slower is still better. The next thing is movement. I don't know if you've noticed, so I guess this is my ego coming out. If anybody notices when I walk. This is a common walk. Okay, nothing looks wrong with this, it's just a walk. But you see what's wrong with it? If you fight like that, now it's even hard for me to do. Every time you go down, you're fixed to the ground. Every time you come up, you're able to move. So your opponent knows, can't move, moving. Can't move, moving. Also they know, can throw, can't throw. Throw, can't throw. So this is what your opponent doesn't want to see when you move. You don't want to see you floating across the ground. I'm doing that by sitting down and moving with my hips. So when I walk, I practice that. I bend my knees, I slightly tuck my hips under, and then I move so the background and everything doesn't move. Okay? It's probably a little better backwards. Everybody turn around for a second. On the other side of the road, there's a line of bushes. Off in the distance, there's all those trees. See them? Okay? What I want you to look at is the edge of the bushes. Look right over the edge of the bushes at the trees. Now, bend your knees down. You see the bushes come up? You stand up, the bushes go down.